Hello and welcome to Colred Plays Raid Shadow Legends. I am Colred. I appreciate you being here. In today's video, I am going to be covering gearing your champions. Now, if you don't know, I do live stream 2 days a week on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. and on Fridays at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Now, on Tuesdays, we do Takeover Tuesdays. So we offer free account takeovers to our viewers. And one of the things that I've been noticing during those takeovers is that most players, regardless of where they are in the game, early game, mid game, even late game players, everybody struggles with gearing. Now, part of that is that you have to collect gear. You have to go out and actually grind the gear. But I think the other difficulty is that it's not always clear, and it's definitely not as clear as it should be, which gear belongs on which champion, which sets benefit which roles, and which stats you need to prioritize. So in today's video, I am going to take you from an early game account all the way through a late game account, and we're going to talk about the concepts that go into gearing. So we're going to help you avoid some of those early game mistakes. We're going to help you develop a system that's going to take you from mid game right to end game in terms of gearing every single champion of every role. And that way, no matter where you are in the game, no matter what your roster is, you're going to be able to optimize your champions and get the most value out of the gear that you do have. I hope you're ready for it. Let's get started. Before we go any further, I just want to say thank you to all of our supporters out there. The channel has just hit 1,500 subscribers. Now, I've set myself a new goal for the end of the year, and that is to get 5,000 subscribers by the end of 2023. If you'd like to help me reach that goal, the first and most important thing that you can do is actually click the like button for this video and any of the videos that you enjoy, because that tells the algorithm that this is a good video and it will share this video with more viewers who have never seen my channel before. And then the second thing, obviously, is if you're not a subscriber, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Not only will you get notifications when I put up new content, but you'll help me reach that 5K goal. Once again, thanks everybody for your support. It's been a great ride so far. We intend to keep it going. Now let's talk about some gear. Okay, this is my early game account. This is my noob versus pro account, the one that I live stream on Fridays. It's less than 40 days old. I think it's like 36 or 37 days old. So you can see I only have 3 level 60 champions, and I have built some level 50s and some level 40s. And I'm just going to take you through these champions builds a little bit so you can see early game what you need to be focused on in terms of building out those champions for the first month or two of your account. Now, regardless of what role any champion plays, the primary and most important stat in all of Raid Shadow Legends has been and always will be speed. Now, it doesn't matter what role the champion is playing, and it doesn't matter where you're using them. There are a few exceptions to this rule. There are very few exceptions, but 90 to 95% of your champions, the most important stat is probably going to be speed. So if you look here, there are only a few places to get speed, but you'll notice that I have speed boots on my Runekeeper Dazzler. Okay, I also have speed boots on my Athel. She's my damage dealer. He is a support, and he's a buffer and turn meter increaser. Now I have another damage dealer. This is a defensive-based damage dealer. This is Shield Guard. He's got speed boots. I've got Wukong, who is a buff remover and secondary nuker, and he's got speed boots. I've got Deacon Armstrong, who is a debuffer and a turn meter controller, and he's got speed boots. So it doesn't matter what champion you're running. Here is a healer and reviver, and she's got HP boots. And this is only because I don't have another set of speed boots. So this is the first set of boots that aren't speed boots, but you'll notice she's still running at 160 speed because I've gotten as much speed as I can onto her in other ways. Now, speed is the universal multiplier. The reason it's so valuable is because it increases the champion's ability to be themselves, to do what they do. And it doesn't matter what role they do. So if they do damage, it allows them to do more damage. Now, you can think of it as a multiplier, but it's not just a multiplier. And I'll give you a quick breakdown here. So imagine that, we're talking about Athel here, and she's primarily a damage dealer. And you'll notice that her base speed is 104. So if I put 40 speed onto her, You can think of this as a multiplier. Okay, she's going to be going 40% faster, roughly. So she's going to be doing roughly 40% more damage. Now, if I can find attack percentage boots here, they would give me, at 5 stars, they would give me 50% attack percent increase. So that would be 50% more damage. So it feels like attack percent boots might be more powerful than speed boots. But there are a whole bunch of reasons why that's not true. The first is that in order to get the most value out of your nuker, you want to go before the enemy. So you need to go first. Going first is a really powerful advantage. You can potentially kill the entire enemy team before they even get a turn. That gives speed an advantage over, say, attack percent boots or defense percent boots. Another thing that happens is that you have skills, you have utility skills on champions, and the more you can get to those utility skills, the more advantage you get for those utility skills that don't necessarily show up as a damage result, but do impact the ability of your team to do damage. So for instance, if I look at Deacon Armstrong has a turn meter fill, and he has a turn meter decrease. The more often he can do this, the more he can speed up the rest of the team. And by the way, turn meter fill is based on speed. So the faster my teammates are, the more that 15% turn meter fill will be in terms of speed. Likewise, Deacon Armstrong has a decreased defense. Now, this does some damage. It is a hit, but the primary purpose of this skill is not to do damage. It's to make sure that we land the debuff so that other champions can do more damage. So making sure that this decreased defense is out there is important. And the more often I can go, the faster I can get back around to this skill, the more uptime this debuff will have. So if it is on the enemy basically 100% of the time, that's the best scenario. So again, for Deacon, speed is really important. Now, if we look at two of our champions here, if we're looking at Athel and we're looking at Deacon, speed is also important for another reason. I want to make sure that if Athel is my damage dealer, in order for her to hit as hard as possible, this decreased defense needs to land first. So not only do I need to have a lot of speed on my team, but I also need to make sure that I have at least a basic speed tune going. I want my buffers and my debuffers to go before my damage dealers. Okay, so this is a very simple concept. Speed is king, speed boots on everybody, on every single champion that you can get speed boots onto. Now, if you are running short of speed boots, if you don't have good speed boots, you can go farming for them. Speed is so important that the substats on your speed boots almost don't matter, especially early in the game. Later in the game, you're going to need substats on your boots that matter, but for the most part, you don't care early game. So you can go and farm in campaign. Now, here I am in brutal campaign, but one of the things that it doesn't matter where, what difficulty level of the campaign you're farming, you can just come here to Palace of Arabia, go to stage 6. And when you farm stage 6 will always drop boots. So if you can get speed boots in the speed set, that's going to give you the best bang for your buck. So come here and farm this. I know it might not be perfectly efficient in terms of XP if you're like farming up food champions, but it's worth it. Come here. Even common boots, 5-star common boots can give you 40 speed when max level to 16. So it doesn't matter if it's common or rare or legendary. The rarity of the piece doesn't matter. It doesn't affect the speed. That only affects the substats. And since you can't have a speed substat on a boot that is main stat speed, it doesn't matter. Just get yourself some 5-star speed boots here in the speed set from campaign. If you can do brutal, you can get 5-star. Even 4-star is better than nothing. Go out and get yourself some 4-stars as well. Another good early game set to farm is in Valdemar Strait. You can come here and do stage 6 and get lifesteal boots that have speed as the main stat. Again, preferably 5 stars if you can get it. On lifesteal sets, typically you're looking for maybe crit rate as a substat. So if you can get even one substat, if you can get an uncommon boot that has crit rate as a substat, that's going to be great. For the speed boot, usually you're going to want accuracy as a substat, maybe crit rate there as well. So if you can get those substats, great. But remember, The speed is the most important thing. So get in here, spend several hundred energy, get 5, 10, 12 copies of some boots with speed main stat in these 2 sets, and you're going to be set for the duration of the early game and probably into the beginning of the middle game. Now, the Forge here is one other place where you can get relatively good gear for cheap, so make sure you're getting into faction crypts and farming up your Forge materials. The best set here early game for speed is going to be for perception sets. Now, if you only have the rare materials, you can go ahead and try to get some 4-star perception gear. If you have the epic material, you can get up to 5-star gear. And if you have any of the legendary material, you can get up to 6-star gear. You can also use charms here. So what I would suggest is in this gear charm right here, go ahead and choose boots. Okay, so you would just choose a boot charm. That's going to increase your chance of getting a boot. Do not put speed substat charms if you're going for boots, because that's a waste. You don't want a speed substat on a boot because that means you can't get speed main stat on a boot. If you're going for other pieces other than boots, for instance, let's say you're going for a chest piece, then you can consider whether you want to use a speed charm. Now, perception sets are best for your debuffers. Think Deacon Armstrong. But this is another way to get a lot of speed onto a champion. So perception sets, speed sets, and then any set that has a boot that has speed as the main stat could be considered on really any champion. Okay, so that is universally true that speed is valuable. But now different stats become valuable for different champions' role. So not every champion needs to be built the same way. So the second thing that you want to do once you start collecting all of your speed boots, and you will never run out of a need for speed boots at 5-star, 6-star speed boots, even all the way at the end game, you will want as much speed as you can possibly get. But in addition to that, you need to start thinking about the roles that each champion performs. Now, I don't mean this role up here. This says epic support, but I don't care that it says support. What I care about is the job that Runekeeper Dazdirk does on my team. So in order to know what his role is, I have to look at his skills. And then once I know what that role is, I have to build him according to that role. You always want to emphasize the primary role of a champion first, especially early game. Don't worry about any secondary role in the early game. Once you start getting better gear and a bigger roster in the mid game, you can start worrying about maybe adding in a secondary role for a champion. But at first, you just really care about what does this champion do best? What do I need him or her to do most? And then build with that in mind. So let's go ahead and look at the skills for Runekeeper Dazdirk. Now, the primary role of this champion is actually this A2. Runekeeper Dazdirk places a 50% increased attack buff on all allies for 2 turns, and then fills the turn meter of all allies by 25%. So he is a buffer and a turn meter filler. Now, that may feel like 2 roles, but this is really just one skill. I just care about one skill here, this skill. Now, he also has a cleanse. He also has a heal and a leech on his A1. So there are all sorts of extra things I could worry about. But if he is the first champion in the turn order, if he is my fastest champion, he will increase the speed of everybody else. And then he will make every attack-based champion hit harder. So this is the only skill I care about. So how do I make this skill as good as possible? Well, I don't need accuracy for an increased attack. All I need is speed to make sure that he goes first. And then all I really care about is making sure that he lives. As long as he's alive and he has access to this skill or, even his cleanse, he is going to be valuable to me. So I don't care about the damage he does. I don't need crit rate or crit damage. I don't care about his attack stat. And this is a big mistake that I often see. If you look at his A1, he does damage based on defense. Now, this is great, but sometimes you'll have a support. Like if we look at Deacon Armstrong, we'll have a support whose damage is based on attack. And people will think, hey, if I want to get the most damage out of my team, I need everybody to be contributing. And so even my supports need attack stat. Now, that's not a bad rationale. It's not. It's a decent rationale. But in terms of gearing in Raid Shadow Legends, that rationale can get you into trouble. I do not want to build Deacon Armstrong with attack. If I can get it in addition to what I need, sure, that's fine. But I don't care about the damage that Deacon Armstrong does. His goal, his role is to empower my team. Just like Runekeeper Dazdurk's goal or role is to empower my team. That's what these support champions do. And in order to do that, they need to go fast. They need to be able to perform their main role. So in Deacon Armstrong's case, he is a debuffer. So he needs to have accuracy. And then the third thing is they need to survive. That's it. That's all I care about. I care about speed, accuracy, and survivability on Deacon Armstrong. On Runekeeper Dazdurk, I don't even care about accuracy. I care about speed and survivability. So these two champions are going to be built very similarly. But there is going to be a difference in terms of the sets that I use. So here I'm just going pure speed set because Runekeeper Dazdurk needs to be the fastest possible. Deacon Armstrong is going to be my second fastest champion. So he doesn't need to be quite as fast because Runekeeper Dazdurk will fill his turn meter. But he needs to be accurate because he is my debuffer. He has to drop this decreased defense on the enemy. And he needs accuracy in order to do that. So what I've done is instead of getting 3 speed sets like I have for Runekeeper Dazdurk, I've put 2 perception sets on Deacon Armstrong. That still gets him some speed, but that also gets him 80 additional accuracy. In addition, you want to think about the substats. One of the things that you'll notice for Deacon Armstrong substats is I have accuracy on most of the pieces. I do have speed on a lot of the pieces, but I'm trying to get speed and accuracy as substats on these pieces. Now, I've been able to do that with a few pieces. On my amulet, I'm always going to want accuracy on my debuffers, and you're probably going to want an accuracy banner with a speed substat roll for your banner. You could potentially go with a resistance banner if resistance is more important or you're trying to compile that. But typically it's going to be either accuracy or resistance, and you're going to want speed on your banner as well, because that's one of the few places you can get some additional speed. Now, again, if we look at Runekeeper Dazdurk and I go through his gear, you'll notice I have almost no accuracy substats here. In fact, maybe I have none. I have none on my gear because I don't need accuracy on this guy, but I do need speed. So I'm going for speed substats. Double rolls, if I can get them, triple rolls would be awesome. But even single rolls are valuable. And again, if we look at the banner, here I have accuracy on the banner, not because I wanted it, but because this was the only banner that had a speed roll. And so I can get 4 additional speed plus speed from glyphs on this banner. So I don't even care about the accuracy. All I care is that I got more speed. Okay, so if you have a buffer or a turn meter filler or something like that, you don't need accuracy, you just need speed. If you have a debuffer, you need speed and accuracy. And then in both cases, you need survivability. So those are the roles for these champions. Now let's look at some of the other champions. So I have Sun Wukong. You have Sun Wukong as well, or you're going to get him in a couple of days. And so when we think about Sun Wukong, we want to think about the role we're going to use him for. Now, Sun Wukong plays 2 roles really well. He can play as a damage dealer, or he can play as a buff removal champion who also debuffs. In order to do buff removal and debuffing, he needs accuracy. In order to do damage, he doesn't need accuracy. He would need crit rate and crit damage. So you have a choice to make here with Sun Wukong. Are you going to try to build him one way? Are you going to try to build him the other? Or are you going to try to build him both ways? Now, what I would suggest is if you are an early or early to mid game player, just focus on one for now. Wait until you get a lot better gear before you try to like branch him out into covering 2 roles. Because if you try to cover 2 roles, you're not going to do either role really well right now. But if you are in the mid game or late game, absolutely consider building him in both directions. So if we look at this setup, you'll notice for Sun Wukong, obviously I have the speed boots. Crit rate is a nice damage stat here. We'll talk more about how to get damage in just a second, but you'll notice the chest plate here is attack percentage. So even though I'm using him as a debuffer, I didn't have a great defensive chest plate, and so I might as well get a little bit of extra attack out of him. But you can notice the substats are speed and accuracy. Likewise here on the gloves, I don't have great defensive gloves, but I've got some speed. And then we've got more accuracy and speed, more accuracy and more speed here. So the accuracy is a little bit lower than I would like, but it's still pretty good at 171. And you can see I haven't emphasized his crit rate or crit damage, but I have decent numbers there. And his speed is 181, which is pretty good for where I am in the game. I would probably get more value out of him if I had a little bit more survivability on him, So potentially I could swap those gloves out for like defense percentage or HP percentage gloves with some speed and accuracy substats. If I wanted to make him more of a damage champion, I would make sure I got his crit rate to 100%, and I would focus on that role instead. And that brings us to our third role here. So we've talked about buffers, we've talked about debuffers. Now we've got to talk about damage dealers. So if you have a damage dealer, you need to focus on their main stat and then crit rate and crit damage. That's how you get damage out of a champion. So if we look at Athel, she is my main carry. And one of the things that I think people make mistakes about is they overvalue main stat. So I do have attack percentage on her chest piece because that is where her damage comes from, attack. However, her gloves are crit rate. Now, it's more important to have 100% crit rate than any amount of attack, really. You're better off here with crit rate gloves than attack percentage gloves. So if you think about attack percentage gloves for a moment, there is almost no champion in the game that needs attack percentage gloves. If you have a support, a buffer, a debuffer, a tank, a healer, a reviver, if you have any kind of support, you need them to be fast and survivable. Crit rate doesn't help you with either one. So speed substat rolls, maybe accuracy substat rolls, and then either defense percentage or HP percentage is what you put in the gauntlets for a support. If you need to do damage, you don't put main stat here. You need crit rate or crit damage here, because gloves are the only place where you can get crit rate as a main stat, and they're the only place where you can get crit damage as a main stat. The optimal scenario is to have crit damage gloves and then to get all of your crit rate from substats throughout your entire gear and reach that 100%. Now that can be tricky, but it can be especially useful for champions who say only need 70% or 85% crit rate. Then it can be a little bit easier. And that's one way to really push your crit damage much higher than you would be able to get it otherwise. So if you are wondering, should I put main stat here? Should I put attack percentage gloves on somebody? Not unless that's the only good glove you have. So if you've got good substat rolls on that and maybe attack does some extra damage for you, then sure. But you should be looking to replace those gloves pretty soon, either to get crit rate, crit damage, or to get that defensive stat to increase survivability. Now, in terms of the accessories here, you're going to want to go with crit damage amulets for any of your damage dealers. Again, you can decide what your substats need to be. You can't get speed from an amulet or a ring. You can only get speed as a substat from the banner. As far as banner is concerned, you can go with any banner that is beneficial here, but usually you would go with the main stat for your damage dealer. So I would like an flat attack banner for Athel, but I don't have one. This is literally the only banner I have in the Sacred Order. And so it's a very tanky banner. I would prefer to move this over to somebody who needs more tankiness, but it is giving her some extra stats and some extra survivability for the time being. Okay, and so that's it. That's all you really need to know, whether you are an early game player, mid game player, or late game player. You can take this all the way to end game. The three things you need to focus on are: 1, get as much speed onto your champions as you can. Eventually, when you start speed tuning like a clan boss team, you will need very specific speeds. But otherwise, generally speaking, every single role of champion is more powerful with more speed. The second thing you want to focus on is designing each champion for its role and gearing appropriately. That includes the stats that you're looking for and also the sets. If you need somebody to be a debuffer, we know that we need accuracy to land our debuffs. So we should be thinking about the accuracy set. We should be thinking about the perception set. If you have somebody who is a cleanser and needs to always be available to cleanse the rest of the team, then they can't afford to ever take a CC. They can't be stunned or frozen or feared or slept or provoked. So they need resistance. Really high resistance would allow them to avoid the CC that the rest of the team gets, and then they can cleanse that CC from the rest of the team. So cleansers, that's the primary role. You want them fast, survivable with a lot of resistance. So they don't need accuracy the way debuffers do, and that's a difference. If you have a tank, somebody who needs to stay alive, maybe somebody who's soaking up some damage from the rest of the team, or who's providing survivability in some other way, or is provoking a lot of the enemy team, then they need extra survivability. So then you look at sets like regeneration. Regeneration heals you by 15% every turn. Again, more speed means more turns, means more heals from your regeneration set. So that's also something that you can consider. If you are looking for extra survivability for your team and you have a champion that has a high HP pool, you can put them in a shield set, and this is going to give everybody additional shields. Again, this should probably be a tank or maybe a tanky support champion. The list goes on and on. Each and every set in the game benefits specific roles more than others. So divine crit rate doesn't make any sense for a support champion, but can be very helpful for a damage dealer. Crit rate can go on a damage dealer of any type. It doesn't matter if it's an HP-based damage dealer, defense-based damage dealer, or an offense-based damage dealer, an attack-based damage dealer. If you don't have a piece in a set that is designed for the role of the champion that you're gearing up, you can use other sets. So for instance, you can use a life set on a damage dealer. There's no reason why you can't. Remember, at this point, substats become very important. Likewise, the main stat might be important. So for instance, if you're looking for crit rate gloves, but you only have crit rate gloves in the life set, that might be what you put on your damage dealer to get to your 100% crit rate. So don't worry about the set that you're pulling from. Try to optimize the set that you're pulling from. Go for the best sets first. But if you don't have a piece in the best set, then start looking at other sets where you still have the right stats, where you still have the right substats. So get those speed boots, get those crit rate and crit damage gloves, get the chest pieces that have HP percent, defense percent, and attack percent. Make sure that you collect pieces like that in every set that you can, so you always have some gearing options for a new champion when you build one out. Okay, so that is gearing. That's how we gear. Remember that if you can avoid the early game pitfalls and start optimizing your gear right away, not only will you snowball your account faster, but then as you collect new gear, you'll know whether or not it's going to be valuable, whether you should roll it up or trash it for some silver. Focus on gearing in the mid game. It's often the case where your roster will eventually get stronger than your gear. Your roster will outpace your gear. And so at that point, you're going to get more value going into the dungeons, farming up good gear, getting those forge materials and forging up new gear. So make sure that you're always staying on top of your gear, upgrading from 4 stars to 5 stars, 5 stars to 6 stars, getting better gear with better substat rolls. Maybe a higher rarity piece will have more substats than a lower rarity piece. So continue moving in that direction. The gearing grind never stops, unfortunately, but the good news is the theory behind gearing well also never changes. So if you master it in the early game, by the time you get to end game, you'll be very comfortable with being able to gear any champion in the optimal way. If you have any gearing questions, feel free to put them in the comments below. Also, if I missed any good tips, put those in the comments below and I'll try to share them in a future video. If you could please help me out trying to reach that 5,000 subs by the end of the year, I would appreciate it. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. I've been Colred. Thanks for joining me. I will see you in another video soon.